Yeah. Okay, well, thank you, Steve. I appreciate that. Gavin, I think that gives you some idea of kind of where we're at in Ireland and the UK. Are these kind of similar issues to what you're facing, or are they a whole different barrel?
No, if I were to ask, the questions, I would ask the same questions. In fact, I mean, very similar questions we have been asking. And so, would it be okay if I just sort of kind of rambled through some thoughts on those and what we've learned and what we're doing? Duncan, is that okay?
That's absolutely fine. And that's what I'd love you to do. Just as Gavin talks, there's the chat function at the bottom there, which Leon's already begun to populate with silliness. But if you've got questions, please throw your questions in there, and Gavin will see them, or if he doesn't, I'll pick them up and we'll ask them with Gavin. So yeah, please go ahead, Gavin.
That sounds great. So, I mean, like you, or like several of you, we were already streaming services on Sunday digitally. We had a pretty robust strategy. In fact, I think the last time we talked about this omni-channel approach and all these different ideas around the physical and the digital kind of meshed together. It really is amazing how all that thinking shifted within a day or two, right? We went from trying to figure out how to make the brand of Woodstock City, North Point Ministries, all these things, physical and digital, work together to all of a sudden now the whole thing is digital, and you've got 4 or 5 days to flip all the switches. And so that was a real challenge, and it felt like we were in triage for a good few weeks, right? So we're just trying to survive. Like, we're in the emergency room and we're not even, I mean, it's 50-50, man, if we're even gonna make it. So that's how it felt in the beginning. What we realized about 2 weeks in is that, and we had been doing this all along, and we were replicating the same behavior. We weren't really creating digital content. We were digitally mimicking physical content. Does that make sense? That word digital mimicking was something we've been using a lot over the last 6 or so weeks. We realized that, and I mean, this should be obvious, but it took us a couple of weeks of this digital world to really understand this, that when you have a physical experience, for the most part, you have a captive audience. There's the random person who will get up and go to the bathroom, but you don't just hit pause in the middle of a live experience, right? Or scrub through the worship or scrub through the message. I mean, you're somewhat stuck in the seats. Well, in the digital world, no one is stuck anywhere. You can turn it on or off whenever you want. And as you said earlier, and we knew this already, I mean, this has been true for years and years and years, but digital content from every church in the country, from every celebrity, pastor, from anybody has been available to everyone. And that has always been a bit of a challenge for us. So even though we have one of those celebrities who I work for in Andy, but those guys are, I mean, not in a callous way, but there's a dime a dozen. There's a lot of those guys. And so the more we become a consumeristic culture, which, I'm not even sure how much more that could happen, but yet every year it seems to happen more. Consuming content from anybody around the globe is so much easier than it's ever been. And so it kind of hit us that, why are we trying to create a digital experience that looks identical to the physical experience? If we were to think like a media company, what questions would we begin asking? So let's not think like a church, let's think like a digital church. If we were to become Amazon of church, what questions would we ask? And I'm gonna look over here to my right, your left maybe. I've got lots of questions that we were asking. And the first question that we asked was, what do people actually need? Which seems fundamentally basic, but we realized that we weren't asking that question. So what do adults need right now? And then what are they gonna need in a few weeks possibly? What are they gonna need in a couple of months? We don't really know, but we began asking the question, what do parents need? What do children need? What do students need? They're all different answers. And in our physical experience, we were intuitively asking those questions and creating what we needed to create almost without thinking. We went digital, and I don't think we asked those questions in the very beginning in that triage kind of ER moment. So we emerged a few weeks later with beginning to answer some of those questions, at least to the best of our ability to answer some of those questions. We also began to ask, what do the unchurched people in our community need? Because, you know, what do your people need is one question, but what do the unchurched people need? I mean, Jamie, you talked about that. I mean, I think that there's this incredible opportunity to reach people right now. And, you know, even though they have access to the entire globe through the internet with every pastor, with every church people are looking for church content. Unchurched people are looking for help. And so what can we do to help? And then the other question unchurched people are asking is it good? It's funny, actually, 6-7 years ago, the number one question an unchurched person, at least in the States, would ask is it helpful? Now they ask, is it good? And if it's good, they'll follow up with, and is it helpful? But is it good is really critical. So for instance, Sunday, we did a food drive, but we did it as a drive-through. So our staff was in the parking lot of our church. We created a massive, almost like fast food drive-through where people brought us food. And what happened in that is, I mean, we obviously raised a ton of food, but the unchurched community through our social media and through everybody's social media who came to the event, everybody was taking pictures, videoing it, excited about it, and then they shared it with all of their friend networks. I mean, think about the unchurched friend networks that we have through social media and our people, right? Their social media pyramid, their channels. So the number of shares that were done just on our drive-through food drive, I mean, it was in the thousands and thousands. And so as a church, we got caught doing good in the community. So when we define, like, is it good? You know, religion is often seen as divisive. I mean, and here in the States, like, you know, we've got Republican, Democrat, it almost has turned, and it's horrible, but it's almost turned into evangelical Christian and liberal. And it's insane how that is, but it's created these new questions. Is it good? Because if it's evangelical Christian, it probably isn't good. It's divisive. It's anti, you know, loving others. It's anti anything positive. It's capitalism. It's all those things, which has nothing to do with Jesus or religion, but it's all become synonymous. And so being caught doing good is a way that we are showing that the church is good for the community. So from outsiders, we're asking that question. Let me see. We started asking the question, with our current limitations, what is the best way to reach people and what is the best way to meet those needs? Because it's interesting. I mean, we're a content library, right? As a church, we all have so much content, but is it meeting people's needs now? And is there need information right now? And what we're realizing, right, and we've known this all along, information isn't really the need. Connection is the need. Peace is the need. Hope is the need. And so we're finding new ways digitally to try to meet those needs. Someone mentioned that your community groups, your groups are actually doing really well in this. We're seeing the same thing. About 92% of our small groups are still meeting weekly. And more people are meeting in each week group than they were previously. Nobody's on vacation. There's no reason to miss. There's no baseball game or soccer match to attend, right? So, I mean, we in a way have a weird captive audience in that. And so, but this desire to connect has never been stronger because we are more disconnected now than we've ever been. So those things are really working well together as we continue to figure that out too. Hey, let me just blow through a couple more. In light of all of those needs, in light of the questions that we're answering up top, the next set of questions were strategy questions. So what do we create? So instead of just digitally mimicking what we've always done, if we were starting again, what would we do? Like, what do we need to create right now? So that helped us reframe our adult service. Does it need to be an hour long? Probably not. You know, does it need to look the same as it did? I would argue probably not. It probably needs to look different. So, and honestly, it needs to look different, not because we're forced to shelter in place, right? It needs to look different because people need to see themselves. You guys probably ask this question all the time. When people walked into your church, we know that we want them to see themselves there. So If they're a person of color, we want them to see other people of color. If they are single, we want to make sure they see people who are single. You know, so what we learned on the digital front is it's no different. When people tune into the screen, they need to see themselves. And so we initially were doing everything on our stage, but no one else was sitting in a room with a stage. It felt weird at first. So we weren't forced to do everything from home. I mean, we've had a lot of restrictions, but you know, I don't know if this is the way with you guys in UK, but you know, there's this thing over here where it's like, we're Americans, we can do whatever we want, you know? So there's a little bit of a, you know, dictatorship isn't really a great thing, but every once in a while it's helpful. This is one of those moments where forcing people to behave would be helpful, but you can't do that in the States. And so there's been a lot of opportunity for us to gather in groups of 15 and shoot videos and junk like that. So we were doing some things on our stage in the beginning, and we realized that it just felt like we were tone deaf, like we were disconnected. So, but again, what does it need to look like? You know, and so you're not just meeting a need of content, it's what does the need even look like? What does the format need to look like? So we began to figure that out. We're still figuring that out. And then the next things are about staff. I'll get to that in a second. So the digital mimicking thing was the most important thing I think we attacked. And we started thinking, if a media company was going to create a church service, what would they create? And I think the first thing we realized is that it can't just be a Sunday thing anymore. Like church, I think for a lot of people, church felt like Sunday. And then Monday through Saturday, they didn't really think much about it. I mean, we think about it all day, but they don't. And then Saturday night, they think about it again, maybe, depending on how the night's going, right? So what we've learned in this is that like the church can't be a Sunday thing anymore. It's an everyday thing. And somebody said this, Jamie, you may have said this, but I mean, it really is an unprecedented opportunity for us to reset and rethink the way church is actually done. Can you imagine if like the Apostle Paul was dropped into 2020? He'd be psyched out of his mind. Like, I mean, you can just tweet to Ephesus, right? And you have to go. So like, we have this incredible opportunity with the digital world and the physical world. And so trying to figure out how to make church an everyday thing. So we came up with a strategy where we're doing so many things now that we never did in the past that we will probably keep doing. I send an email to our church community now every Tuesday morning, and it's one part devotion, one part vision, but it is keeping everybody connected to something, and it's moving people to do something, which has been really great. Every Thursday, I record and we put out on our social channels a devotion. It's 3 minutes. But, you know, we were in such a mode of thinking, well, to communicate a biblical truth, we need to create connection, tension, truth, application, landing. It's 35 minutes. It's all that stuff. You know, we've created some of the coolest 3-minute things I've ever seen. And we did all 5 of those elements in 3 minutes. So it's forced us to learn simplicity. It's forced us to really trim out the things that are not necessary anymore, because I don't think we need 40 minutes to say something that can be said in 3. So we're relearning all that. It's changing the way our sermons look. I mean, even Andy, man, he's the king of 40 minutes, and it is so, he's the best in the world, but I'm biased. I work for him. But even he is, you know, changing some of his sermon structure, and he's still on the stage, but he's reduced the time by about 25% in most cases. I mean, our Easter sermon that he did was one of the best messages I've ever heard from him. And I think it was 27 minutes, which is way too long, I think, still for digital only, but it's 13 minutes short of what we typically do. So I think those kinds of things are happening. So this idea that church is open every day, the strategies that go with that. So how do we, you know, and we've learned email is king. You know, the problem with social media is that you stumble across social media, but you almost ask for email. So our email lists have become the most prized possessions we have right now, because the algorithms and all that. Hey, hold on really quick. So the the way the algorithms work in social media, I mean, you may have 10,000 followers, but your video may only get to 1,500 people. I mean, but email gets to every person. And so we've done a lot of focus groups during this kind of digital hiatus. Every one of them has said, you can't send me too many emails because your emails, the Woodstock City emails, are always helpful. I want them, and they're meeting a need for me. And so we were worried that we were spamming people. We didn't want to do that. And they were like, no, you can do more than that. So that was a really interesting learning in this digital season for us too. And we've known that, but a couple more things we've learned. One, digital options have to always be available. So in the past, we would do a volunteer training. We would gather everybody in a room 2 or 3 Sundays in a row and try to get everybody to show up to one of them. Now I'm like, why in the world will we not just stream that stuff? And you can be here or you can just log on. It doesn't matter. But we just want you to get the information, and we want you to feel inspired and informed and prepared. We don't need you to be in the room to do that. So it's forcing us to think, a little bit more this way. All of our, volunteers, the highest level volunteers, our staff would meet with them a few times a year. And, we were thinking, gosh, we would save so much money if we met with them once a year physically over a meal, and then 2 or 3 or 4 times a year just through a digital, through Zoom or whatever. So much easier. So, and cheaper and just as effective. I mean, not that we would replace it completely, but it would help. On Sunday morning with our students, well, with everybody, honestly, but especially with our students, we prioritize small groups. The problem with small groups is that you have to be at church to be in the small group. So our team right now is trying to figure out the feasibility of putting a TV in every single small group room connected to a Zoom chat, so that every single student, whether they're in the building or not, can still be in the small group. So I think it's those kinds of things we're beginning to realize, that a true omni-channel church is one that doesn't isolate anything to physical or to digital. It's both all the time, as much as it can possibly be. So we're trying to figure that out. A couple more, I go real quick. We jokingly call it the law of diminishing astonishment. You've heard of the law of diminishing returns. The law of diminishing astonishment is a church, I think, thing. Well, maybe it's just an entertainment thing where people, it's amazing the first time you see it. The first time somebody heard you preach and they thought, oh my gosh, it wasn't in Latin and I can understand you, and it was helpful. Like, that was astonishing to them, right? A year later, they're like, and you're like, no, it's just as good as it was then, So, but that law of diminishing astonishment digitally is way faster than it is physically. And we've also learned, maybe in tandem, that digital minutes are not the same as physical minutes. I mean, a digital minute goes really quick. So when we think about our segments in our service, it's like, if you did a welcome in the service and it lasted 4.5 minutes, we would go, it may be 30 seconds too long. Can you imagine sitting through a 4.5 minute welcome digitally? Like, we've been trying to make it at 2 minutes max, 1.5 minutes. Because, digital minutes just aren't church minutes or live, physical minutes. So that's been a big thing for us. So trying to figure out a way to keep it fresh. And sometimes that's just the background. I mean, like a medieval dungeon or, something like that, but something just to keep it fresh, to make it feel like it's not the same thing over and over again. That actually isn't that expensive. That's just changing your environment. And go outside one day. You can do it. There's other ways to accomplish that. Also, from segment to segment in our service, we've changed where the welcome is in one place, the worship set's in one place, the message is in one place. Even that makes it feel fresher. And so those little tweaks have kind of helped keep people engaged in it. Hyper personal wins all the time. We've known that forever. But now I think more than ever, the more personal we can make it, the better it is, the higher the engagement. We've been doing some Facebook Live things because it brings everybody together in real time, in a real-time chat where we can pray for each other in real time. We can worship together in real time. That's been really, really helpful for us in our community because people feel disconnected. Facebook allows us to be connected in the same time, kind of in the same place. So that's been really interesting for us. We're doing that every other week right now. That's been pretty cool. It also is allowed, when you think about how personal it is, the last Facebook Live, I just went up on the stage with my phone and started talking to people who were chatting prayer requests in, you know, and praying for people live in the Facebook Live. I mean, it sounds like, duh, why would you not do that? But we had never done those kinds of things, right? I mean, the next time we do a night of worship, it will be a Facebook Live where we have a live audience and a digital audience, and we'll do both the whole time. Because why would you not when you have access to both? Last thing is that I heard our staff keep saying, well, when the new version of normal gets here, and then I last week stopped them all and I said, no, this is the new normal. Like, we can't think that at some point things will go back to normal, and it'll be different, but it'll be normal. I'm like, it's not. Like, the old normal is completely gone, and we are in a new normal right now that we have to really live in for a while. We can't just survive through it. We need to really leverage it and take advantage of it. And then at some point in the future, like for us, we're targeting August. We think that's when we're going to be able to regather again, based on all the trends and all that here at least in Georgia and Atlanta. But when August rolls around, sure, things are going to look different. It won't be like it was in January, but we're in a normal right now. We need to think of it that way. And when we get to August, we need to really think about the re-entry into this normal, and how do we bring a lot of the things that we've learned today into that. So that's a lot of talking about not staff. We haven't touched on that yet. And I haven't been able to talk and read the chat, so I'm sorry.
It's fine. No, I wouldn't. I think, in my experience of doing these Zoom calls, when people are quiet, it's because they are absorbed so much with what's being said and writing it down and making sure they don't miss anything. Before we dive onto the staff thing, has anybody got any questions they want to jump in for Gavin? Just, unmute yourself and dive in. While you're thinking of those questions, I was talking to one pastor the other day, and I thought, man, this is brilliant. I'd never thought of it. He said his son told him that you can, when you go on Twitter, you can look at a hashtag of anything you want, and you can make it quite local, so you can see what people around your local area are saying about this hashtag. So he said he just typed in the word depressed, hashtag depressed, within a 10-mile radius. Ton of tweets of people saying, feeling depressed today, feeling sad today, a bit anxious today, this COVID thing's getting on top of me. And he said he just tweeted back everybody who he never met before, just saying, really sorry to hear this, just to let you know I'm praying for you by name today. And he said 95% of people got back to me and said, wow, some people said, who are you? I don't want you to pray for me. And he said, oh, that's fine, no worries. But 95% came back and said, wow, that's really cool. Could you pray for this and that and the other? And he started a relationship and invited them all to come and join them digitally. And I thought, wow, and that's a mindset shift about discipleship and pastoring that all of us can do. As
Duncan, think about that example though, how in the past, my mindset, our church's mindset would have been, oh, you're struggling, you should come to church on Sunday. And they were like, yeah, but I'm depressed now and it's Tuesday.
Yeah.
So I need to wait. There's no more of that, right? We are all shifting to this being an everyday kind of thing.
Yeah, it's great. So let's dive in before Gavin pushes onto the staff thing. Let's dive in with this. What questions have we got?
I've had an observation with you saying about some of the community needs. We found that when we posted about our food bank, thousands of interactions, and I've raised that question of how are people actually engaging with what we're doing. And our youth people have been fantastic in churning out stuff. And I know myself, I've been feeling overwhelmed by everybody's statement on COVID and what they want to do and what they're doing. And I'm just like, if people feel like that with our emails and stuff, then this is not good. So last Sunday, we did an online family bake-off, obviously completely scriptural. But that had our best online engagement for families and young people. We've got most people joining us on a morning, but so it wasn't a church-based thing. It was an activity, it was connection, it was sharing what you've done, lifting it up to the screen and tasting it in front of everybody. And we just had so much fun. So that kind of thought about connecting and the need of doing something and sharing an activity. So what you were saying is sort of help put some theory, if you like, behind some of what we've been kind of doing. So I found it really helpful. Thank you.
So Tracy, what a great example though of them being able to do something together at the same time and experience each other at the same time through it. I mean, it's exactly what we're trying to figure out through Facebook Live and things like that. It's a wonderful example.
Okay.
It's great.
I will pass it on to them.
Chris.
Gavin, if you talked about how helping people see themselves online. You know, they want to be able to see themselves in the room. How do you do that online?
You know, about 2 weeks in, maybe 3 weeks in, I was asked our leadership team to study everything they were watching and analyze why they thought it was working. It was fascinating to see people like Jimmy Fallon for us. So these are all people in the States that I'm thinking of. Jimmy Fallon, Stephen Colbert, lots of these late night talk shows. They all went in their home, you know, in an overnight. Watching Jimmy Fallon's kids, little daughters, jump on him as he's trying to do thank you notes and all the little gags and junk that he does was brilliant, because everybody was stuck at home and they were like, oh, Jimmy's stuck at home too. He's like me. He's no different than me. It was an interesting, like, I think our church might feel more connected to me now, and I've been here for 11 years, than they ever have. Because normally they're sitting in rows, I'm up on a stage, they're wearing, you know, whatever, I'm in skinny jeans. I mean, you know, there's just disconnect, right? Now, I'm sitting in my house filming a video, and they're sitting in their house watching it. So it feels like they can see that. Every once in a while, you know, you'll see it. I mean, I've had, you know, kids before pop into a video. I mean, just things like that makes it, because, you know, you think about, like, all of our parents are homeschooling right now. You know, what a disaster that is. So, but talking about how we're homeschooling, you know, people are like, oh, Gavin's doing that too, you know? So there is this kind of like, I think people can see themselves if they can look through the screen and see that you're experiencing what they're experiencing. So I've tried as much as I can every time I'm on camera to say, hey, we just did homeschooling, you know, blah, blah, blah. Or, hey, I was at home yesterday and, you know, or right now at home, we're trying to, you know, or you maybe heard my dog barking. Sorry about that. You know, I'm stuck at home. So just constantly reminding people that we're all in this exact same situation. I think that has really helped.
So Gavin, have you changed your tone with your preaching and your style?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, if you want to see how far I've changed it, we really kind of went the opposite direction. We did a 2-week series called The Wonder Years. I shot it actually at church, but it looks like I'm at home. We structured it so it looked like a home. And we shot it like a late night talk show. I'm sitting at a desk with a graphic bubble over me with all sorts of stuff. I mean, so it's on our site. You should check it out, not because it was great, but because it was such a deviation from what we would do on a normal Sunday in a message as a test. But the feedback we received was unbelievable because it felt different and it felt like people could see themselves in that. Okay,
that's great. Any more questions into this before we move on?
Hey, by the way, I've got a little bit more time, but I don't know if you guys do, so I don't want to. Don't rush because of me.
No. We'll push on to, maybe we said we'd do an hour, but we might push on till 1:15 if that's okay.
I'm good. So 11:30 is my next one for me.
Okay, that's great. If you need to duck out, please duck out. Tim.
A question about staffing in terms of a lot of the things, if we're going to have to do both going forwards, is going to mean reshifting our staff makeup, because a lot of our people at the moment are kind of just for the old way. And so we've all had to kind of muck in. I think it was Steve said earlier about how, because there's no old way, all of those great people are now just doing the new way. Brilliant. When we then go back to a bit of a hybrid of both, staffing is going to have to look quite different, and yet we don't yet know what that will look like. So there's going to be quite a chunk of time where we're finding our feet but don't have the staff to be able to do it properly. Any hints?
Well, so we are right now, I mentioned August. We have tentatively put August the 9th on the calendar as our re-entry date into church. So the staff thing is a big part of this conversation, because there are things we're doing right now we won't do in August, September, October, assuming things get back to where we can gather physically. But there are lots of things we're going to want to keep doing. And if I'm honest, I think there are some things we're not even doing yet, we would like to be doing, that we're going to want to be doing. So our staff makeup is going to have to shift a little bit. And we're going to have to employ more video creators than we've ever thought before. We're going to figure out a way to contract that or volunteer, that. Like, we have never thought about having volunteer roles for video people. I mean, we've never thought that way, right? But we're going to have to do that now. I think we've also, I mean, at North Point, this won't be shocking to any of you, especially if you've been around over here in the States and seen it. We're pretty staff heavy. Like, we are a little too well resourced, unfortunately, which, I say that because, I mean, success is one of the greatest, the scariest things you can have, because you can accidentally become lackadaisical when you're successful, and you cease to be as scrappy as you used to be. And so we have a little too many staff right now. We cut back a good bit in Q4 of last year across the board. I think we're going to want to not cut back again, but I think we're going to need to reallocate some of those resources. I think some of our more volunteer heavy staff positions will be reallocated to volunteers, so that we can get the highest level volunteers. And you know what? I bet you're all doing this better than we are already. Possibly out of necessity, or maybe just because you're smarter and you have never let that go. But I bet we will shift some of our resources away from managing Here Comes Sunday. We'll let some high-level volunteers start doing some of those things, and we will shift towards Here Comes Tuesday. We've got to have people who can help create content, manage social, digital, all those kinds of things. Another great thing in this too, though, on the staff, is that I've been beating my head against the wall on this for years, that we would not think departmentally, we would think holistically. But when you're working in the elementary, ministry department all week long, it's pretty difficult to not just think about elementary ministry. But when you only think about elementary ministry, you do what you think is best, sometimes to the detriment of what might be better for everybody. So I think we talked last time about being customer-centric, not organizationally centric. This is forcing that conversation to go even further, because now every department is having to coordinate and collaborate, because you can't send 7 emails, you need to send 2. I mean, as I said earlier, email is king, and we aren't spamming people, but if our preschool, our elementary, our middle, our high, adult, if we all sent the same, I mean, that'd be ridiculous. So we're being forced to think smarter about the customer and forced to get out of those silos. I think what we're finding is that a lot of our silos have some duplicated positions that might not need to be duplicated in every department. So I think we're going to find some efficiencies in our staff there, that we can then reallocate some of those efficiencies towards more of this digital stuff. But I mean, to be fair, I mean, I'm also operating with 65 staff members. So, I mean, it's one thing to reallocate 3. I mean, that conversation is so different, right? So we're talking about reallocating 5 or 6 people, but we're still going to leave 55 to 60 somewhat in place.
So can I ask a question to that then? Because that means, as I'm just thinking with a pastor's hat on, that means some of these conversations with staff members might need to be tricky conversations. If you need more video creators, as you say, some more digitally oriented staff, that means you're going to have to say some people who've been more physically around physical church. You might need to be saying, we need less of people like you and more people that we haven't got yet. So you either need to shift into this new role and thrive, or we kind of don't need you anymore. And that seems like a really hard conversation.
Right. Well, that will be if we get to that point. Here's what we're hoping, though, is that we started doing an exercise with our directors, so the people who direct departments, and we've asked them to look at their staff members and think through what skill sets, not that they're doing in their job, but what skill do they actually own that they could bring to the staff that we haven't really asked them to do yet. We have several people who are really good content creators, who have the ability to create scenes and settings and help, maybe not edit in Adobe Premiere, but who can help with those kinds of things. and they've never been asked to do it because they're a groups director in preschool. So we're trying to see what skill set our staff has right now so that we can, when we get to a reallocation, we can look at people who already have skill, reallocate them towards that, take the people who don't have those skills as much and allow them to backfill some of those vacated roles. I'm hoping that we avoid maybe any, hey, thanks, but it's not January anymore and what you do isn't helpful. I mean, I don't think we're going to have that. But here's the other hard part of this. I also think that this is the analogy, maybe that you guys can help me come up with a better one, but I feel like we're almost like a manufacturing organization, and we've been producing widgets every week. And then the government stepped in and said, hey, there's a new regulation and you still need to produce those widgets, but now you have to also do this too. And that new thing is social digital. And I realize as the owner of the manufacturing facility, we can't cut manufacturing staff because we still have to produce the widgets, but we also have to meet the new government requirement, which means we may have to have a few more staff than we used to have. And the old way of producing in the manufacturing facility, 30 staff was all we needed. In the new way, 30 is what we need, and we need 5 more because there's a new regulation happening. So I think for us as the church to stay kind of connected, we're gonna have to also, I don't think we can reduce staff because Sunday's still gonna be Sunday, and we're still gonna need to do a great job on Sunday. But at the same time, we gotta figure out how to do a really, really great job on Tuesday as well. So, we may back off of some of the excellence, on Sunday. I mean, you know how this is. I mean, you do this too, I bet. We spend, the same amount of money to go from nothing to 85% effectiveness. We double it to go from 85 to 100.
Yeah.
And about 5% of the people recognize the difference between 85 and 100. And we spend millions of dollars trying to get to 100. I think we're going to see a lot of things back down to 85 to free up resources, whether it's fiscal or people resources. And you're seeing this online. Like, nobody is complaining to Jimmy Fallon and saying, well, the video quality isn't as good as it used to be. And I mean, nobody cares, right? I mean, they care if it's, in his case, is it funny? Is it entertaining? And did it take my mind off of what's going on? I don't care that it was a little fuzzy or that a dog jumped into the screen. So I think we're going to have to rethink what is acceptable because it's not going to be what it used to be.
So how are you having sorry, I seem to be asking all the questions here. Steve, did you have a question?
Yeah, so when you talked about the law of diminishing astonishment, that's going to be the case on Sundays in the physical as well.
Yep.
And that's a hard battle to try and keep raising the game on, isn't it?
It is. Steve, that's the problem, is that you can only one-up last week a handful of times, right? Like when I was working in student ministry, we would every summer just do acoustic worship sets for a couple of reasons. One, it was cheaper. The other reason, and if I'm honest, is because it reset everybody's astonishment. So when we came back in the school year with lights and fog and electric guitars, everybody was like, oh, this is so cool. We're like, well, it was cool last fall too, but you just forgot. So I think what we're going to have to do is stop relying on astonishment as the attraction and start relying more on personalization as the attraction and relationship as the attraction. And that's hard in a auditorium that seats 2,100 people for me. But can I give you an example of something I think I'm going to do? Now, this may objectively fail, and we may, quit doing it after a month. But when we start meeting corporately again, I think I'm going to, in the welcome every week, do something we're going to call life updates, where I'm going to look at a room of 2,000 people and go, hey, somebody tell me something good that happened last week for you. And I'm going to have 3 or 4 people just yell stuff out from all over the room. And we're going to celebrate it. We're going to pray for people in that moment. Now, you guys may have already been doing this, but we're not. But I think making it, the more personal we can make it, the less astonishment will matter anymore. And that's what this has created. Like I've noticed on our social channels, I've spent so much more time commenting back to people and having conversation with people through Facebook and Twitter and our YouTube and all that. We weren't doing that, hardly any, in January. Now I'm doing it constantly. And it is changing the personalization nature. And I think astonishment will become less important because of that. It's a guess, though.
Great, thank you. I think that's what we've found even going digital. If it just stays with staff on screen and it doesn't involve others, which is why we would do competitions and do live links and that kind of stuff, because it puts other faces, plus people within our church on screen, which I think is appreciated.
And I thought we've had a couple of staff members, they work in student ministry, but they did an Instagram live where they were getting a self-home haircut. And, hundreds of students tuned in to watch. Matt Hayes did it. Haven't seen his new haircut yet, but he just did it a couple days ago. And, I'm like, I don't know, I'm 45. I'm like, this is so stupid. Like, but it's not, because those students feel more connected to Matt now than they ever did when he was standing up on a stage with a mic in his hand. So that real life, that real personal stuff is giving us an opportunity that we have always had. I just don't know that we saw it the way we do right now.
Yeah.
Can I ask a question, Duncan?
Derek, go ahead. Yeah.
So one of the things that we've discovered with our live stream and our Zoom groups is that we're connecting with people who don't live that locally to us. So maybe you're people who might live maybe in 2 towns away, but know 1 or 2 people here. So they're coming on a Sunday and they're joining in with Zoom groups. And already people are saying, well, if we start gathering physically, that person won't be able to be in our home group anymore. And but at the moment, we've let them be part of us. And so I'm not quite sure what we do when we go back physically, whether how we include those people still. I mean, obviously they could watch on a Sunday, but in terms of Zoom groups and that sort of stuff, any comments on that from yourself or anyone else?
I mean, yeah, for us, I mean, we feel like there are no geographic limitations anymore at all. I feel 100% comfortable with people joining group. And now I think that we may try to create, and we already do this, digital only groups and then physical meeting groups. But if a group is comfortable with having a laptop open at every group meeting with a couple of people joining them digitally while you meet physically, like, I think that's a part of this new omni-channel that will look that way. And I think we should embrace that. Like, I think that's could be potentially a great thing.
Yeah. Okay.
That's good. Gavin, let me ask, in fact, Chris Porter, why don't you dive in and ask the question you've put in the chat, because it's a great question.
Yeah, Gavin, I'm just going back to your example of the widget manufacturing and thinking the same thing. I mean, I suspect one of the questions we'll have is, what do we not do that we were doing before? Yep. So in that example, if there's this, if it's not about a regulation, but it's about an opportunity that's there, if you stopped making some widgets and started doing something else, you'd increase your market share in that example. Mm-hmm. Will you guys consider not doing something in order to, again, staff or usual volunteers to grow this new opportunity, which is, I suspect, where a lot of us will be in terms of our capacity with income falls and all that kind of. We'll have to be saying, we're not going to do this because we've got this opportunity.
Yes, that is a great question. In fact, one of the kind of North Point Ministries leadership team questions is that every other week or so, we come to that question: what are the things that we don't want to do again? Like, what have we stopped and we haven't missed? That's been kind of the way we've asked it. What have we stopped doing that we haven't missed? And so we already run kind of a simple church model anyway. We don't do a lot of superfluous stuff. I don't say superfluous as in a negative way, but for us, we don't do Wednesday nights. We don't do Sunday school. We just have small group only. So we're already somewhat consolidated as a church, which has made this a little easier because we're not trying to digitally create all of this stuff. I will say that we have, it's funny, like, because we have 6 locations, we typically would be 1 or 2 days a week driving to the central location for some meetings and all that. No one has missed that. And we'll never do it again. I mean, why would we drive and lose 40 minutes one way of our workday when we could just be doing it like this? So we are not going to miss that as much. We're not going to bring that back. Any of these all staff things where we all get together, we'll cease doing. I think that there are some groups that we've created in our care kind of department that we have migrated to be more one-on-one mentoring based instead of group based. And partially because this medium has made it easier to do mentoring based. And I think we'll stick with that. I don't think we'll bring the group-based stuff back with us. I think we'll stick to more one-on-one mentoring, knowing that it can be done digitally. You know, like, I mean, it was so silly that we thought in January, well, we can't really do mentoring unless you can both go to Starbucks together. I mean, there's no reason that a financial mentor in Atlanta can't mentor someone in the UK. I mean, it's pounds and dollars, but other than that, it's the same principles, right? So I think that those kinds of things are shifting, and we won't bring those with us. But really, I'm not sure exactly yet how many of those are on the list. And I don't have a better answer quite yet.
That's good. That's helpful. So we've probably got another 8 minutes or so, because I'm sure Gavin wants to go and fill up his coffee mug before his next meeting. Yeah, what other burning questions have we got about either about the shift towards digital church and the future, or what about? A couple
things I did write down, Duncan, I forgot to mention really quick. One, we realized that, you know, our keystone habit is invest and invite. We know that if everybody is thinking invite, it keeps us honest. It makes our church services outsider friendly, not seeker sensitive, but seeker sensible. So that idea, we felt like, oh shoot, we're losing that muscle in this because you can't invite somebody to something. And then all of a sudden I thought, no, that's the most ridiculous thing ever. Digitally, you can invite people all the time. So we've shifted a lot of our language to encourage our staff, to encourage our attendees to share as much as they can. So we say it constantly now, sharing is the new inviting.
Yeah.
So tag people on stuff, share things with people. It's also forced us to think about what we're creating, because if it's not shareable or worth sharing, we probably shouldn't create it. So if we want people to invite, we had to create something worth inviting to. Now, if we want people to share or tag, we got to create something worth sharing and tagging to. So that piece has been really important for us as well.
I love that. If it's not shareable, why on earth are we creating it in the first place? Leon, you had a question.
Yeah, just a quick one, Gavin. You may have already touched on this, but obviously pre-COVID, we were on site, maybe streaming what was in the room. Now, of course, we're in a digital space. When we go beyond this to a hybrid, because it sounds like you've shifted a lot in terms of how you're communicating your services. Do you see maintaining that when you go into on-site and online, or would you revert back a little bit? How do you see that whole thing playing out?
Yeah, we're just on the cusp of that conversation, Leon. And what's interesting is that, I mean, in the 30 minutes we've only spent on it so far, one of the things that I felt pretty passionate about was, if you wake up in the morning, take a shower, get dressed, sit in our parking, traffic, all that stuff, it better be worth all the effort. You know, like, so you can't show up to church and it be a 28-minute thing. I don't think that's worth it.
No, absolutely.
But I don't know, what is it, 58 minutes, or is it 48, or is it 108? I don't know.
Okay.
And the other tension though is that what's best for the physical experience isn't what's best for the digital. We do know that.
Yeah.
So it's going to force us to figure out some version of not just broadcasting what we're doing in the room.
Okay.
I think we're gonna have to figure out some other mechanism.
Okay.
So that it's not just a voyeuristic thing, you know? But that's the part of this problem. We talk about, how do you allocate staff? How do you hire for that? I mean, that's a lot more complication.
Yeah. Thank you. That's helpful.
That's actually where a lot of our thinking is, Gavin, at the moment. Is realistically speaking, you know, we talk about your point earlier on that church is not just on Sunday, right? You know, it's every day. But there is a cultural expectation, especially this part of the world, that church happens on Sunday.
Same here.
I think what we've realized is the strategy of trying to get people to sit down in front of a device for, whether it's half an hour or an hour, it doesn't matter. Anything more than 5 minutes at a set time on a Sunday is unnatural to digitally native people. So we're trying to figure out, what does it mean to create a church experience of content that is for the church, but is shareable, invitable, likable, all the things you just said. But then how do we attack the, you know, for us, we do 11 a.m. and a 7 p.m. now service on Sundays. From 8 p.m. on Sunday to 10 a.m. Sunday the following week, what are we creating midweek that is much more custom built, strategic content that is very much for the unchurched in mind, rather than trying to get all the unchurched to log in and watch our service on Sunday. That's kind of where our headspace is at the moment, is separating those two things and freeing ourselves from the limitation of trying to make it all fit one thing.
Yeah.
The idea that unchurched non-Christian people in Ireland would sit for an hour and watch a church service. It's not going to happen here.
Duncan, I just emailed you some viewer data from our online services. So you can send that to all the guys on the team. Basically, it's each of our campus locations, their individual watch times for the Sunday services. So you can kind of see where they peak and all that kind of stuff.
Thank you.
Yeah. That's been very interesting for us. So the metrics I just sent you, it takes out everybody who watched less than 2 minutes. So you're anybody who just clicked on it and was like, oh, that was an accident, or oh, this, I love the devil. Why am I watching this? Like, we took those people out, but we kept 2 minutes and beyond in the metric. And so you'll see how the watch time varies. And, Jamie, in an interesting way, we kind of found out that the vast majority of people were viewing almost the whole service, whether it was 30 minutes or 48 minutes, which was surprising to us on Sunday. So, but I don't know if that's just our insiders, and I don't know. I'm not sure, but
I don't know whether I'm allowed to disagree with you, Gavin. I know I'm allowed to disagree with Jamie.
You can disagree with me all you want.
That's quite legal, but I actually think, and maybe going back to Chris Simpkins earlier on had said about, are we reaching the YouTube generation or a new generation of people our age who are just figuring out YouTube?
Yep.
But people who sit down, my kids, they sit down to watch YouTube videos, and they'll watch quite long YouTube videos. I think people are, if the content's good and people have figured out early on how to grab you and to keep you going all the way through, to tease you,
yes,
to give you promises that this is coming up in a minute, and to change the pattern, change the scenery frequently, so it's not just one piece to camera for half an hour. So I think when people do that, people are used to sitting down and watching something for half an hour.
I think, well, that was kind of what we were realizing. We were thinking that we needed to shrink it immediately. We need to become bite-sized in everything that we do. I think that helps in some respects. I think what we've seen is that 45 minutes may still be okay, or an hour may still be okay, but it can't just be one person talking for an hour. Like it needs to be segmented in a way that's a little bit more interesting, and it. Also, by the way, I'm not Andy Stanley. So, like my kids will watch YouTube for hours as well, but they're watching the best of the best on YouTube. And I'm not that either. So Andy can get away with something that I can't quite get away with yet. So
I think though, Gavin, I think that there's a challenge that though as well. I think, going back to the original premise what you said, people want connection.
Yes.
I think a lot more people are watching people they know and like. I can go online tomorrow and watch Andy, watch Furtick. They all, after 10 minutes, I'm bored.
Yep.
I agree. It doesn't matter who they are. I'm not interested. But I watched a buddy the other day who posted a really haphazard video. It was crap, to be honest. But I watched it because I know the guy. I like him, I was rooting for him. And I thought, I wonder if this is how my congregation feels about me. Like,
they do.
Crap. he's crap, but I like him. You know what I'm saying? So I'll keep watching. More than pre-COVID-19, it was a lot of the kind of, that kind of big gun kind of attraction. I think the connection thing may have inverted the tables a little bit in that.
I mean, you think about how this is going to be a reset in a lot of ways too. I know in our community, people are grateful for the time they've had with their families. They're grateful for the slower pace. There's so many things that they're grateful for. And I think some of those will come with us into this next season. And Jamie, I think you're right. I think part of that will be, that's why I talked a lot about earlier about this high personalization stuff. That's going to become really, really important. I mean, we've said this all along, like Andy on video. I mean, Andy Live's a 10 as a communicator. Andy on video may be an 8. Well, I may be a 6 on video, but if I'm live, I may be an 8. It's like, so Gavin live versus Andy video, there may not be that big of a difference. Jamie, because of what you just said, the people in my church who have been around with me for 11 years, they're saying, hey, that guy's crap, but I do like him and he's my guy. Like, I like that guy. I feel like I know him. I'm connected to him. So, hey, I stuck in the chat window a link to the 2-week series we did that was completely different. So as an example of something that, if nothing else, it was an experiment in being a media church. But
brilliant. We'll enjoy that. Thank you so much. Cut and paste that, guys, and enjoy that. I just want to honor your time, Gavin, and everybody else's time. So I can't tell you how rich this has been. And my mind is racing with so many great ideas, and we will carry this conversation on. Just to remind people, they're welcome to jump on tomorrow or press others in your team to jump on tomorrow. But at 11 o'clock tomorrow, I'm in conversation just about this whole subject with Dave Adamson, who I know Gavin knows very well, about how to preach, how to communicate like a YouTuber. How do YouTubers do it? Let's learn some lessons so that we can communicate like them. So that's 11 o'clock tomorrow morning. And then to mark your calendars, on the 15th of May, I think it's 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Again, this is huge. Rick Holliday from North Point Partners, who does a lot of their operational stuff, a lot around finance. He's going to talk to us about how in these days when money's going south, how we can still do great ministry, and how we can reallocate funds and do budgets in this difficult time, and how actually we can raise money in this difficult time. And I've listened to some of the stuff he's talked about in other settings around that, and it is gold dust. So I'll email you out to remind you, but 15th of May, I think it's 2 o'clock in the afternoon, UK time and Ireland time. But for now, let me just pray really briefly and we'll head out. Father God, thank you for these folks that I can see on my screen. Thank you for the courage they have right now in leading in this brand new crazy time you've put us in. I pray you will keep them safe, keep their families safe, and keep them motivated to walk strong as leaders through this difficult time. Pour your blessing upon us, we pray, as we learn new ways of living and leading. We ask these things in the beautiful, strong name of Jesus. Amen.
Amen.
Amen. Thanks, Gavin.
Hey, anytime.
Gavin.
I've known you, it's awful, but it's fun to see your faces. So
thanks, Gavin.
Thanks,
Duncan. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, guys. Thanks, Duncan. Thanks, Gavin.
Thank you.
You're most welcome. See you all. God bless you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye.